Close your eyes and picture this. High in the frozen mountains of Siberia, the wind cuts sharp through pine forests, carrying with it the silence of ages. At the base of these cliffs lies a cave. From the outside, it is just a dark hollow in the rock. But inside, hidden beneath layers of soil, lies a record of hundreds of thousands of years of human history. Fires once burned here. Tools were shaped here. Children grew up here. And among the countless traces left behind, one tiny fragment would change everything we thought we knew about ourselves. In 2008, Russian scientists working in this place Denisova cave found a piece of bone no bigger than a fingernail. It came from the little finger of a girl who had lived more than 40,000 years ago. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about it. Archaeologists find bones all the time. Most vanish into storage boxes, catalogued and forgotten. But this fragment was different. Because inside it, preserved in silence for tens of millennia, was a message written in DNA. The bone was sent to the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany. There, under the direction of Svante Pääbo, a pioneer in the study of ancient DNA, scientists began to unlock its secrets. Pääbo's team had already done the impossible. They had sequenced the genome of Neanderthals. They knew what the DNA of our closest relatives looked like. So they expected this fragment to match either Neanderthals or Homo sapiens. But when the results came back, the sequence didn't fit either. It was different. It belonged to a kind of human no one had ever seen before. Neither us nor Neanderthal, but something else, something new. In that moment, the human story grew more complex. What we had thought was a straight line, a too primitive man, too modern human, was revealed to be a tangled forest, full of lost branches and forgotten cousins. And this new cousin, revealed by a fragment of bone, would be called the Denisovans. The name came not from their own words. No one knows their language, their songs, their myths, but from the cave itself, Denisova. A simple geographic label for an entire people. We have no monuments to remember them by, no cave paintings to show us their dreams. All we have are fragments, a finger bone, a few teeth, and their DNA. But from these fragments, a picture emerges of a people who walked this earth for hundreds of thousands of years, only to vanish. Think of the girl behind that fragment. She was young, perhaps no older than 12. She lived in a world colder and harsher than ours, surrounded by endless forests, hunted by predators, bound to her family and her tribe. She played, she laughed, she carried wood for the fire. She might have listened to stories told by the elders, watching sparks drift into the darkness of the cave roof. She never knew that tens of thousands of years later, her bone would speak for her people when all else had been silenced. DNA is a diary written in molecules. It survives when names and voices are long gone. By decoding it, scientists can reveal kinship, migrations, and lost lineages. From this single fragment, we learned that Denisovans were as distinct from Neanderthals as Neanderthals were from us. 3 parallel branches of humanity, all alive at the same time. Imagine that. 40,000 years ago, the Earth was not ours alone. Neanderthals still thrived in Europe. Homo sapiens, our species, was spreading outward from Africa, pushing into Asia. And in the east, in caves like Denisova, in mountains and valleys, stretching from Siberia to Southeast Asia, lived another kind of human. A cousin we never knew existed. For generations, these groups shared the world. They met, they traded, they fought, and sometimes, they loved. Because even though the Denisovans are gone, their story did not end in that cave. It lives on in us. That tiny fragment was not just a bone. It was a doorway into a hidden world of humanity we had never imagined. But who exactly were the Denisovans? How far did they roam? And how much of them still endures within us? To answer, we must step deeper into their story. The fingerbone from Denisova Cave was only the beginning. It told us they existed, but not who they truly were. To understand them, we must reconstruct a world long vanished, a world where different kinds of humans shared the same planet. The Denisovans were not an isolated accident. They were part of a broader family that split from the ancestors of both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens around 600,000 years ago. From this branching point, Neanderthals moved westward into Europe, where they adapted to cold steppes and forests. Homo sapiens remained in Africa, slowly developing the traits we carry today. And to the east, another lineage spread into Asia, becoming the Denisovans. Imagine that vast stage: Europe shaped by glaciers and forests, Africa, the cradle of our species, and Asia, immense and diverse, stretching from the Siberian tundra to tropical islands. It was on this eastern stage that the Denisovans lived. For hundreds of thousands of years, they adapted to landscapes as varied as frozen caves, high mountains, and humid jungles. At first, scientists thought Denisovans might have been confined to Siberia, known only from the cave that gave them their name. But as genetic analysis improved, the illusion of isolation shattered. Evidence of their DNA appeared far from the Altai Mountains. Populations in Oceania, including Papuans and indigenous Australians, carry as much as 5% Denisovan DNA. People in East Asia show traces to Otten high on the Tibetan plateau. Researchers found a jawbone so large and unusual that at first it seemed alien, belonging to a Denisovan. This discovery in Bashia Karst cave was astonishing. The fossil had survived in one of the harshest environments on Earth, nearly 3,300 meters above sea level. Their oxygen is thin, the air cold, and survival difficult. Yet Denisovans thrived. The gene EPase-1, found in Tibetans today, allows blood to carry oxygen more efficiently in high altitudes. It came not from Homo sapiens, but from Denisovans. They had conquered the mountains long before we set foot there. But what did they look like? Here the mystery deepens. Unlike Neanderthals, who left behind complete skeletons, Denisovans are ghosts. We have only a handful of remains: a finger bone, 3 molars, the jaw fragment from Tibet. From these, we know their teeth were unusually large, so large that one molar looked more like it belonged to a different species entirely. And genetic studies suggest their skulls may have been broader, their jaws heavier, their faces flatter than both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. In 2019, scientists attempted something extraordinary. Using patterns of DNA methylation chemical markers that affect how genes are expressed, they reconstructed probable features of Denisovans. The results hinted at a human with a wide pelvis, large ribcage, and broad skull. Their dental structure was distinct, suggesting powerful jaws. Yet, without a full skeleton, every picture remains a sketch, an echo of what once was. Still, the evidence points to a people robust and adaptable. They lived in caves like Denisova, braving Siberian winters. They climbed into the thin air of the Tibetan plateau. They spread into Southeast Asia, perhaps even reaching islands where they may have encountered other humans, like the small-bodied Homo floresiensis, the hobbits of Indonesia. Imagine such a meeting: one species tall and powerful, the other tiny but clever, both carving out existence on the same volcanic islands. But Denisovans were not only survivors of nature, they were participants in a greater human drama. Genetic evidence shows they interbred with both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. One of the most extraordinary discoveries came in 2018, when scientists sequenced the DNA of another fragment from Denisova cave. It belonged to a girl whose father was Denisovan and mother Neanderthal. A first-generation hybrid. Proof that these groups were not just distant cousins, but sometimes family. This interbreeding had profound consequences. The genes Denisovans passed down remain in us today, shaping our biology in ways we are only beginning to understand. Their DNA helps modern populations adapt to environments, influences our immune systems, and may even affect how our bodies process certain foods. Though the Denisovans vanished as a separate people, their legacy endures in our blood. So who were they? They were not mythical creatures or distant beasts. They were humans in the truest sense, upright, tool-using, fire-making, socially complex. They likely spoke languages, though we do not know the words. They likely sang, though their songs are lost. They raised children, told stories, and mourned their dead. They lived lives that, in many ways, would feel familiar to us. Their disappearance, then, is not a tale of failure. It is a tale of blending. As Homo sapiens spread across Asia, they encountered Denisovans. Sometimes they fought, sometimes they coexisted, and sometimes they shared lives closely enough to have children together. Over time, instead of surviving as a distinct people, Denisovans became part of us. They are not gone, they are absorbed, their lines merging into ours. Think of that for a moment. When you see the peaks of the Himalayas, when a Tibetan shepherd breathes easily at altitudes that would leave others gasping, you see the Denisovans. When geneticists examine immunity in Southeast Asia and Oceania, they find the fingerprints of Denisovans. They live in every cell of millions of people today. The story of the Denisovans reminds us of a humbling truth. The human story was never a march of progress with one chosen species triumphing over all others. It was a complex tapestry, woven from many threads. Some threads burned bright for a time and then vanished. Others blended, merging into a larger design. Denisovans were one such thread, forgotten until science rediscovered them, but still woven through the fabric of our humanity. Yet even with all we know, the mystery remains vast. We can describe their genes, we can map their spread, but we cannot yet look into their eyes. No complete Denisovan face has ever been seen. No artist has painted their likeness from life. We hold their presence like a shadow, defined by absence as much as by evidence. And that raises the next great question. If their legacy is written in us, how exactly does it shape who we are today? From the oxygen in our blood to the defenses of our immune system, what echoes of Denisovans still whisper inside us? To uncover that, we must turn to the most intimate evidence of all, not bones, not caves, but the DNA we carry within us. We ended with a question. If the Denisovans are gone, how exactly do they live on inside us? To answer, we must follow the threads they left woven into our very DNA. Because it is in our blood, in our breath, and in the invisible defenses of our bodies that their story continues. The most famous Denisovan legacy lies high on the Tibetan plateau, a land where the air is thin and life clings to steep cliffs. For most people, climbing above 4,000 meters is exhausting. Oxygen levels drop, our bodies gasp, our hearts race, and altitude sickness can become deadly. But for Tibetans, Sherpas, and other highland peoples, life above the clouds is normal. They herd yaks, plant crops, and raise children where outsiders can barely breathe. The secret is genetic. Researchers discovered that Tibetans carry a unique variant of a gene called EPase1. This gene controls how the body responds to low oxygen. In most people, low oxygen triggers a surge in red blood cell production. It helps for a while, but too many red cells make the blood thick and dangerous. Tibetans, however, regulate this differently. Their EPase1 variant allows them to adapt without overproducing blood cells, giving them an edge in high altitudes. And when scientists traced its origin, they found something remarkable. It came not from Homo sapiens, but from Denisovans. This means that long before Homo sapiens settled Tibet, Denisovans had already mastered the mountains. They had lived and thrived in thin air, and when our ancestors later arrived, they inherited that ability through interbreeding. Today, every Tibetan breath that flows calmly at 4,500 meters carries the echo of Denisovan lungs. But altitude is not the only arena where Denisovan genes left their mark. In Oceania and Southeast Asia, populations carry significant Denisovan DNA, sometimes as much as 5%. That may not sound like much, but in evolutionary terms, it is huge. These genes influence immunity, skin adaptations, and perhaps even fertility. One set of Denisovan genes appears to help fight viral infections, making populations more resistant to diseases that might have devastated early human groups. Another affects the way our skin responds to ultraviolet radiation, shaping how people adapt to different levels of sunlight. In fact, many scientists now believe that Homo sapiens survived and spread so successfully not just because of their own adaptations, but because they borrowed them from Neanderthals, from Denisovans, from every cousin they met along the way. We are not a pure species. We are a mosaic. Each of us carries fragments of other humans, stitched together over millennia. Think about that. We often speak of pure bloodlines or separate races, but the truth, revealed by DNA, is that humanity has always been mixed. Our survival was not isolation, but exchange. We are here today because long ago, our ancestors shared not just culture and tools, but their very genes with the people they met. The Denisovan legacy goes deeper still. Some of their genetic fragments appear linked to metabolism the way our bodies process fats and sugars. Others may affect how our immune systems respond to allergies or autoimmune conditions. These are subtle echoes, shaping the details of health and disease in modern populations. Scientists are still mapping these influences, but already it is clear, Denisovans helped shape the biology of millions alive today. There is another way their legacy matters, by reminding us that human history is not simple. For generations, textbooks taught a story of Homo sapiens spreading out of Africa, replacing all others. The Denisovan DNA inside us tells a different story, one of contact, of mingling, of shared survival. We did not simply outcompete them. We became them, and they became us. It is a humbling thought. Somewhere in the veins of a child in Papua New Guinea, in the breath of a Tibetan climber, in the immune cells of a Southeast Asian farmer, the Denisovans still live, not as a separate people, but as a presence quiet, invisible, enduring. And their genetic echoes also remind us of the fragility of survival. The Denisovans lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, thriving across continents. Yet they did not endure as a distinct lineage. Climate change, shifting landscapes, and the arrival of Homo sapiens slowly erased their independence. But through interbreeding, they avoided total extinction. Instead of vanishing completely, they dissolved into us. In this way, they achieved a kind of immortality. Not through monuments of stone or cities of brick, but through biology. They continue in our cells, not as memories, but as living functions, helping us breathe, fight disease, and adapt. The Denisovans are not just a chapter in our past. They are a line still written in our present. And yet, their genetic legacy does more than shape our health. It reshapes how we see ourselves. For centuries, humans have drawn lines between races, between nations, between us and them. The Denisovans erase those lines. They show that humanity is not separate boxes, but overlapping circles. They show that identity is not purity but mixture. This realization has philosophical weight. When we look for our place in the world, we often ask, what makes us human? The Denisovans whisper a different answer. Humanity is not one thing, but many. We are the sum of countless lineages, countless exchanges. We are, in a sense, all hybrids. Consider this: if you carry Denisovan DNA, then part of your survival today, your breath, your blood, your health, depends on a people long vanished. People whose names we will never know, whose faces we cannot yet see, but who endure in you. Their extinction was not an ending. It was a merging. And what of those who carry little or no Denisovan DNA? Even then, the story matters. Because the existence of Denisovans proves that the human story was never solitary. Every one of us descends from ancestors who shared the planet with other humans. Every one of us is shaped by encounters, choices, and exchanges in a world richer than we imagined. The Denisovans teach us humility. They remind us that Homo sapiens did not rise alone, did not triumph through superiority alone. We survived because we mixed, because we borrowed, because we were willing or perhaps simply compelled to share. And there is one more twist. Denisovan DNA is not evenly distributed. It is stronger in some populations than others. But that variation itself tells a story of migrations, of encounters, of chance meetings tens of thousands of years ago. A Denisovan child in the Altai Mountains leaves descendants in Papua New Guinea. A Denisovan family high in Tibet leaves genes that help modern climbers ascend Everest. What seems random at the time echoes across millennia. We often think of history as kings and battles, of civilizations rising and falling. But sometimes history is written in a gene passed from mother to child. Sometimes the most important legacy is silent, invisible, carried in the breath of those who never know its source. So, the Denisovans are not gone. They are here, in you, in me, in millions alive today. Not in our monuments or our languages, but in our cells. Their story is not just ancient history. It is modern biology. And yet, even with all we know about their legacy, one great mystery lingers. If their DNA is inside us, if their genes shape us still, why do we not know more about the people themselves? Where are their faces, their tools, their culture? What kind of world did they build before it was lost to time? To answer that, we must leave genetics behind and return once more to the earth. To the caves and mountains where Denisovans lived. To the fragments of tools, ornaments, and ashes that might reveal not just their biology, but their humanity. The Denisovans live on in our DNA. Their genes still shape the way millions of people breathe, fight disease, and survive in difficult environments. And yet, as a distinct people, they are gone. Their camps have vanished, their fires are cold, their voices are silent. The question that lingers is simple but profound. Why? Why did a people who thrived for hundreds of thousands of years disappear? Why did the Denisovans, spread across a continent, strong enough to survive in mountains and jungles, vanish while Homo sapiens endured? To begin answering, we must return to the Ice Age world they inhabited. 40,000 years ago, the Earth was a place of extremes. Ice sheets advanced and retreated like tides of frozen stone. Winters were long and brutal. Summers were brief and uncertain. Ecosystems shifted constantly. Grasslands turned to forests, forests to tundra. For any species, survival meant adapting, moving, or dying. The Denisovans had proven themselves adaptable. They survived in Siberia. They conquered the Tibetan plateau. They spread into Southeast Asia. But adaptability is not invincibility. A sudden climate shift could strip away food sources. Glaciers could trap migration routes. Prey animals could vanish. In a world of constant change, even the strongest could be undone. Yet climate alone does not explain their disappearance. After all, Homo sapiens endured the same harsh swings. The difference lies not just in nature, but in encounters with us. When Homo sapiens left Africa around 60,000 years ago and began spreading across Asia, they carried something more than tools and fire. They carried culture. They carried symbolic thought. They painted, carved, and told stories. They shared ideas across groups. And through this sharing, they innovated rapidly. A spear thrown with a stone point became a spear tipped with bone, then with flint, then perhaps with poison. This ability to innovate and spread ideas gave Homo sapiens an edge. Wherever they went, they adapted quickly, and as they spread eastward, they encountered Denisovans. What followed was not a simple conquest, nor a sudden replacement. It was a long, complex meeting. The evidence is in our DNA. Denisovans and Homo sapiens interbred more than once. These unions were not rare accidents. They happened often enough that Denisovan genes spread widely. This means there were times of coexistence, times of mingling, perhaps even times of peace. But in the end, Homo sapiens expanded, while Denisovans faded. Why? Part of the answer may lie in numbers. Homo sapiens seem to have traveled in larger, interconnected populations. Denisovans, by contrast, may have been more scattered, more isolated. Small groups are vulnerable to famine, to disease, to chance misfortune. A volcanic eruption, a plague, a harsh winter could wipe out an entire community. And when small groups vanish, their culture vanishes with them. Another factor may have been competition. In fertile valleys, where resources were rich, Homo sapiens and Denisovans likely competed for the same prey, the same shelter, the same territory. Even without open conflict, one population could gradually push out another, simply by being more numerous, more efficient, more cooperative. Over centuries, the balance tilted. Denisovans, once widespread, shrank to smaller refuges. And eventually, even those refuges failed. There is also a darker possibility: conflict, war. The archaeological record is silent here. We have no evidence of battles between Homo sapiens and Denisovans. But we know humans are capable of violence. It is not impossible that clashes occurred, and that in those clashes, the more numerous sapiens prevailed. Yet perhaps the most profound reason for their disappearance was not defeat, but absorption. Interbreeding meant that Denisovan children were born into Homo sapiens groups. Over time, Denisovans did not simply die out, they were folded into us. Their identity dissolved, their culture vanished, but their genes survived. Extinction, in their case, may have been less an ending than a transformation. This idea that extinction can mean survival of a kind changes how we think of the past. The Denisovans are gone, but not gone. Their disappearance was not a failure. It was emerging. They are with us still, invisible but real. And yet, for all this, we must not forget what was lost. Because while their DNA remains, their culture does not. We do not know their myths, their songs, their rituals. Did they bury their dead with care, as Neanderthals sometimes did? Did they paint on cave walls, carve symbols, tell stories by firelight? We cannot say. In this, their extinction was real. A unique way of being human vanished forever. When we look at the caves today, we see only fragments, tools that could have belonged to any Ice Age human, teeth that tell us little beyond their size, bones that whisper of existence but not of life. The Denisovans left no monuments, no Rosetta Stone of culture. Their world dissolved with them. This is why their vanishing matters. It reminds us that history is fragile. Whole peoples can live for hundreds of thousands of years and still vanish almost without trace. The Denisovans prove that survival is not guaranteed, and that the line between presence and absence is thin. Think of this: when the last Denisovan group sat by their fires, they had no idea they were the last. To them, life was as it had always been: hunt, gather, raise children, tell stories. But slowly, inexorably, their world narrowed. Fewer children, fewer camps. Until finally, there was silence. But their silence is not complete, because in us, they endure. Every breath taken by a Tibetan climber, every child in Oceania carrying their genes, is proof of that. Their disappearance as a people was balanced by their survival in us. They are gone, and yet they are here. So why did the Denisovans vanish? The answer is not one thing, but many. Climate shifts, small numbers, competition, interbreeding. A tapestry of forces, some harsh, some gentle, all converging on the same outcome. And this outcome raises another question. If we carry them in our DNA, if they are part of us, then what did they truly look like? What faces looked out from Denisova cave, from the mountains of Tibet, from the forests of Asia? Can we ever know the people whose blood still runs in ours? To explore that mystery, we must turn not to bones, but to science at its most creative, reconstructing faces from the faintest chemical clues left in ancient DNA. We ended with a question. If Denisovans live on in our DNA, if their genes still shape our bodies, then what did they look like? What kind of faces once gazed out from Denisova cave, or from the windswept mountains of Tibet? Here lies one of the greatest mysteries of all. We know they existed. We know where they lived. We know how their genes shaped us. But we do not know their faces. For Neanderthals, the story is different. Archaeologists have uncovered dozens of skeletons, from skulls to ribs to feet. From these, scientists have reconstructed bodies and faces. When you look at a Neanderthal reconstruction today, you see heavy brows, wide noses, strong jaws, a recognizable cousin, different yet familiar. For Denisovans, the evidence is painfully scarce. We have only fragments, a child's finger bone, 3 large molars, and a jawbone found high on the Tibetan plateau. Enough to prove they were real, enough to sequence their DNA, but not enough to show their full form. It is like trying to imagine a person from a single tooth. The molars are striking. They are huge, far larger than those of Homo sapiens, and even larger than many Neanderthal teeth. They suggest powerful jaws, a strong bite, perhaps a diet that required crushing and grinding tough food. The jawbone from Tibet reinforces this image, thick, robust, with space for those massive molars. But teeth and jaw are only part of the picture. What about their skulls, their faces, their posture? Here, DNA itself offers hints. In 2019, a team of scientists attempted something extraordinary. They used patterns of DNA methylation chemical changes that regulate how genes are expressed to infer the Denisovan anatomy. By comparing Denisovan DNA with that of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, they could predict which genes were more or less active, and therefore which traits might have differed. The results painted a rough sketch. Denisovans likely had wide skulls, with long dental arches to fit their large teeth. Their faces may have been broader, their jaws more projecting, their chins less pronounced than ours. Some reconstructions suggest flatter noses, others hint at differences in ribcage and pelvis. But these are models, not portraits. They give us a sense of direction, not a finished picture. And so we are left with shadows. Unlike Neanderthals, whose faces have been reconstructed with lifelike detail, Denisovans remain faceless. We can only guess, building images from fragments and statistics. This absence is haunting. To know that a people lived, thrived, and shaped us, and yet to never see their faces, is like hearing a song without melody. We know the rhythm, we feel the echo, but the tune is lost. Still, artists have tried, using the data we have, combined with knowledge of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Some have sculpted possible Denisovan faces. They tend to look robust, strong-jawed, with broad features and heavy builds. Some could pass as Neanderthals. Others could walk among us, and we might only notice something slightly different in the jaw, the cheekbones, the teeth. It is possible that if you passed a Denisovan on the street today, dressed in modern clothes, you might not realize. They were not monsters, not aliens. They were human, like us, different in detail, but not in essence. The irony is that we may know their genes better than we know their faces. We can map their DNA across continents, trace it in living people, analyze its effects on altitude, immunity, and metabolism. But we cannot yet paint their portrait with certainty. Their biology is clear, but their appearance is blurred. And yet, this blur has meaning. It reminds us of the limits of our knowledge. It humbles us, showing how much can be lost to time. Whole peoples can vanish without leaving a single face behind. But science advances. New discoveries may change this. Each year, more fossils are uncovered. Each year, technology improves. We may one day find a Denisovan skull, complete and undeniable. When that happens, we will finally see the faces of those who left their breath in Tibet and their blood in Oceania. Until then, we imagine. We reconstruct. We build stories from fragments. But perhaps there is another way to see their faces. Not in bones, but in mirrors. For if Denisovan DNA lives in us, then in some small way, their features live too. A cheekbone in Papua, a jawline in Tibet, a hidden trait passed silently from parent to child. Look closely enough, and the Denisovans are still here, reflected in us. And this brings us to another question. Even if we cannot yet see their faces, can we trace their movements? Can we follow their journeys across Asia, their encounters with Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, their spread into mountains and islands? In other words, if we cannot yet picture them, can we at least map their footsteps? Because in mapping where they went, we might finally understand not just who they were, but how they lived and why their story still matters. High in the cold shadows of Denisova Cave, buried in the same soil that gave us a child's finger bone, another fragment was waiting. When scientists studied it in 2018, they discovered something astonishing. It belonged to a girl whose parents came from two different human worlds. Her father was Denisovan, her mother was Neanderthal. This single child rewrote what we thought we knew. It proved that Denisovans and Neanderthals did not just meet by chance, they lived closely enough to form families. Two branches of humanity, separated for hundreds of thousands of years, came together again in one child. That discovery was the first of many surprises that forced us to redraw the map of what Denisovans were, and how far they had reached. For a long time, the story of Denisovans was tied to a single cave in Siberia. But slowly, the evidence began to spill across the continent. On the Tibetan plateau, at more than 3,000 meters above sea level, a massive jawbone was discovered in Baishia Karst Cave. At first, scientists could not believe it. It was too big, too strange. Only later, through protein analysis, did they realize it belonged to a Denisovan. The find was extraordinary, proof that Denisovans had lived on, thrived in one of the harshest environments on Earth, where oxygen is thin and survival is a constant challenge. And then came Oceania. Genetic studies revealed that people in Papua New Guinea, the Philippines, and indigenous Australians carry some of the highest levels of Denisovan DNA in the world, up to 5%. That is not the trace of a small, isolated people. That is the signature of a widespread presence, stretching thousands of kilometers, from icy mountains to tropical islands. How did they reach so far? We don't yet know. Perhaps they followed coastlines when sea levels were lower. Perhaps they built simple rafts, crossing short distances that added up to great journeys. However they traveled, their genes proved that Denisovans were explorers. They were not trapped in a single cave. They were a continental force. Even more surprising, genetic analysis today suggests that Denisovans were not just one group, but many. Different populations lived in different regions, each with their own adaptations. Some interbred more with Homo sapiens, others with Neanderthals, others perhaps remained apart. The Denisovans were not a single people, but a family of peoples, spread wide and diverse. And this reshapes our picture of the ancient world. 40,000 years ago, Earth was crowded, not empty. In Europe, Neanderthals hunted mammoths. In Africa, Homo sapiens thrived. In Asia, Denisovans lived in caves, climbed mountains, and reached islands. And in Indonesia, the small-bodied Homo floresiensis walked the forests. At least 4 kinds of humans, alive at once, sharing a planet. Imagine such a world. Each rediscovery brings us closer to seeing that world. In Southeast Asia, tools and ornaments hint at advanced cultures, though we cannot yet be sure which human hands made them. If some were Denisovan, it would mean they too shaped symbols, created meaning, perhaps even art. The evidence is fragmentary, but it grows each year. The story of the Denisovans is being written in reverse. We did not start with full skeletons, then build DNA. We started with DNA, and are still searching for bodies, faces, artifacts. Each new discovery is like a lantern lit in the dark, illuminating a little more of their story. And these surprises remind us of something profound. History is not fixed. For tens of thousands of years, the Denisovans were forgotten. Then, In a single decade, they reappeared in our knowledge. What else waits, hidden beneath soil and ice? How many other human branches lie buried, silent, waiting for a fragment of bone to tell their story? The rediscovery of the Denisovans teaches us humility. It shows that our story is wider than we thought, richer, more entangled. It shows that extinction does not always mean erasure. Sometimes it means transformation. Sometimes it means survival through us. And as their footprints expand across our maps, another question arises. Beyond bones and DNA, beyond genes and geography, what do the Denisovans truly mean for us today? What lessons do they leave behind, not as fossils, but as echoes of what it means to be human? Imagine standing in the darkness of Denisova cave. The fire has long since gone cold. The voices are silent. The walls echo only with the sound of wind rushing through the pines outside. And yet, though the people who once lived here are gone, they are not absent. They are still here, inside us, in every breath and heartbeat. That is the paradox of the Denisovans. A people who vanished, and yet endure. Their bones are scarce, their faces unknown, their culture lost. But their DNA continues to flow through millions of people today. They are gone, and yet alive. Silent, and yet speaking. Forgotten, and yet remembered. The echo of the Denisovans is written in our very bodies. In Tibetans who climb mountains where others gasp for air. In Papuans who carry genes that once fought off ancient diseases. In immune systems, in metabolisms, in the quiet machinery of life. Every time these genes do their work, the Denisovans live again. But their echo is more than biology. It is a lesson about what it means to be human. For centuries, we told ourselves a simple story: Homo sapiens rose, and all others fell. We imagined ourselves as the chosen species, superior, destined to rule. The Denisovans remind us that this story is wrong. Humanity was never one straight line. It was a forest, full of branches. Some ended, some merged. Some, like the Denisovans, dissolved into others, yet survived in unexpected ways. This is the first lesson of their echo, that survival is not always conquest. Sometimes it is sharing. Sometimes it is blending. The Denisovans did not lose by disappearing into us. They achieved a different kind of immortality, one that no empire could match. They became part of us, inseparable, enduring across millennia. The second lesson is humility. We are not the only way to be human. Others walked this earth, hunted its animals, braved its climates, told their stories. We are the last survivors, but not the only ones who mattered. The Denisovans, like the Neanderthals, like Homo floresiensis, show us that humanity was once plural. We are a chorus of voices, most now silenced, but still resonating in echoes. And the third lesson is fragility. If a people as widespread as the Denisovans could vanish almost without trace, what does that say about us? We build cities, we send rockets to the stars, we connect across the globe. And yet, we too are vulnerable, to climate, to conflict, to choices we make. The Denisovans remind us that no species is guaranteed eternity. Survival is not a right. It is a question asked anew in every generation. Yet fragility does not mean futility. For though they vanished, the Denisovans still shape the world. Every climber who ascends Everest, every Sherpa who guides others through thin air, carries their gift. Every scientist who studies their DNA, every student who learns their name, keeps them alive in memory. They are proof that even in silence, influence endures. So, when we ask, who were the Denisovans? The answer is more than bones and genes. They were a people. They were children playing at cave mouths, hunters stalking in forests, families huddled by fires. They were human in ways we recognize, though their songs are lost. And though they vanished as a people, they remain as a presence invisible, but real, echoing within us. Think of it this way: look at your hand. Within it are cells carrying DNA written long before you were born. Within that DNA may lie fragments of Denisovan code, instructions passed from a girl in a Siberian cave 40,000 years ago, down through countless generations, to you. When you breathe, when your blood carries oxygen, when your body resists disease, you may be hearing the quiet echo of her people. And that echo carries a message. That we are not alone in our story. That we are built from many lineages, many encounters, many exchanges. That purity is an illusion, and mixture is our truth. We are not the end of the human story, but the latest chapter in a long tangled book. The Denisovans ask us to listen to the voices lost, to the fragility of survival, to the richness of our shared humanity. They ask us to see that what endures is not always what we expect. Empires fall. Monuments crumble. But a fragment of DNA, carried in blood, can outlast them all. So as we close the story of the Denisovans, we do not close it entirely. Their chapter continues, written in us. Every breath at high altitude, every immune defense shaped by their genes, every memory we recover through science. These are their echoes. And perhaps, when we ask what it means to be human, the Denisovans offer the truest answer. To be human is not to stand alone, but to carry others within us. To be human is to be a mosaic, a tapestry, a blend of many forgotten voices. To be human is to echo with the lives of those who came before. In that sense, the Denisovans are not gone. They are with us still, in our veins, in our breath, in our story. Their fires are cold, but their spark endures. Their faces are unseen, but their presence is clear. Their voices are silent, but their echo is within us, always.